Hi, I'm Rachel Schwartz. I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the director of social services for JCC Chicago, where I've been working for almost 18 years now. And in this role, I'm really here as a support and a resource to all of the families in our early childhood programs and day camping programs. And I'm available as a resource on all things social, emotional, and child development related. And I would say that the most important hat that I wear is that of a mother to three beautiful children. My oldest son, Levi, is 11 years old. My middle son, Sawyer, is going to be 9 next month. And my youngest daughter, Alexa, just turned 6 years old. My oldest two sons have severe life-threatening allergies, food allergies. My oldest is severely allergic to tree nuts, and my middle son, Sawyer, to tree nuts and peanuts. So I had really hoped that we were going to be here today having this conversation in person, but I'm still so super excited to be here interviewing Jack Yonover. He is the writer and creator of the documentary That Bites. And thank you, Jack, for being here. Welcome. We're so
Thank
happy to
you.
have
Thank you
you.
for having me. Yeah, so I made this film in seventh grade. I'm currently a senior in high school, and next year I'm planning to go to USC to study film and philosophy, though let the coronavirus take care of itself before I get too excited about leaving home. But yeah, I made this film in seventh grade, and really the primary goal was to educate people about food allergy research and education. And although there's been some time since the film was created, I still want to spread it and show it to as many people as possible, because that is still a goal quite deeply about.
That's great. Thank you. First, I mean, I really want to say thank you as a parent of some of children who have severe food allergies, because I am so grateful that someone like you made this movie to really help educate and bring awareness to the food allergy community. So thank you. And what I found really exciting was that you were an alumni of JCC Apache Day Camp. So that was really cool to
True.
hear. Um, but I want you, tell us a little about yourself. And also, a lot of children have food allergies nowadays. It's more prevalent than ever, but they don't go out and make movies about it. So I'm really curious, what inspired you to make a movie about this?
So really my whole life I've wanted to be a filmmaker, at least as long as I can remember. And I actually was not diagnosed with food allergies until I turned 10. It was sometime in fifth grade, and actually gave me quite an interesting perspective on this issue, which has been a growing issue for a long time and is really more common than ever. Going from someone who didn't have to live with this concern to suddenly having to watch what I was eating and make all of these lifestyle changes. And one of the big things I noticed making this jump to life of a food allergy sufferer was that there was just a lot of general ignorance, even among myself, before I had this condition. And so I decided, as someone who loves making films and wanted to kind of get his foot in the water with filmmaking, what could I do as some sort of educational tool to help bring people together and get us all on this common ground so that we can understand this issue? Because again, it really isn't that rare. I don't know the current statistics today, but this has been a growing issue. You see more and more kids with food allergies everywhere, and it's probably very underdiagnosed. So I thought, this is something that we want to raise attention to. And even if you aren't directly related to someone who has a food allergy, there are just very little things you can do when you come into contact with these people that make their lives easier and safer. And so that's why I chose film as the forum for this educational opportunity.
That's awesome. Do you feel like, your goals came to fruition? Do you feel like what you set out to do was accomplished by making this film?
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much impact I can see, and only so much impact one small documentary made by a seventh grader can have. But in terms of my own inner circles and life, the people that I showed this film to, I noticed an immediate difference, and a meaningful difference as well. Just at family gatherings, all of my family members and extended family who had seen the film went from kind of not understanding what my nut allergy was all about to knowing exactly how to accommodate for it and really more empathetic. I think the biggest thing I learned creating this film and seeing the impact it has on people is with food allergies, there's a lot of misinformation and lack of understanding that comes across to people as, they don't care about the issue, but it's more that they don't understand the issue. And once my extended family was understanding what I was dealing with and the specifics of it, they were extremely empathetic and able to accommodate me and make me feel safer. So it had a great impact, I know, with those that saw it.
That's great. So how long did it take from conception of the idea of, hey, I want to make this movie to actually finishing it?
So in the beginning of grade, I said I want to make this project, and my dad recommended some sort of crowdfunding measures to raise, because you can't just go out and buy all this equipment. So I made a short little video. I didn't really know what it would do. It was essentially a trailer for this idea of the documentary That Bites, and we put it on Facebook and put it on Kickstarter. And within 72 hours, it was really quite a crazy ride those 3 days. Over $10,500 from people all across the country, mostly people I'd never heard of. It really wasn't a family-funded affair. These were people on the internet who found out about the project and also dealt with food allergies. And so we had all of this money to go make this film with, which was very overwhelming because I really didn't see it. And over the next year and a half, we spent that money. I learned how to use this complicated equipment. I interviewed tons of different kids, parents, bakers, and it was just a fantastic experience. And it was a long experience too, about a year and a half between editing, production, and raising the money.
That's incredible. If I'm remembering correctly, I think you told me that it was came off of a bar mitzvah project, a mitzvah project.
That's true. That is true. It was a mitzvah project. I believe it's called the Tikkun Olam project, but I'm not quite sure. That was a long time ago. Originally I thought, I want to do something charitable for my bar mitzvah project. Here's a good opportunity. I do believe I released it after my bar mitzvah, so I might have missed the window there a little bit. That was the initial inspiration, my bar mitzvah project. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's incredible how much money you were able to raise. I think it speaks volumes as to that it's such an important cause. So how have things evolved and changed in the world of food allergies since you made the film?
Yeah, I think especially in fifth grade when I was first diagnosed, it almost felt like a more rare issue than it is right now. And I think the biggest thing that's changed that I'm super excited about is we have more and more treatments that could potentially help people overcome food allergies permanently. Now, it is in more elementary stages, but I actually have a friend who happens to be in my Hebrew class who's allergic to the same nuts as I am, cashews and pistachios. This year, he started an immunization treatment where he's slowly exposed to a small amount of the food he's allergic to and worked his way up to a bigger time. A few weeks ago, was able to fully overcome the allergy. So I think that's the number one difference is there's a lot of optimism on the horizon for potentially erasing this issue eventually, and definitely an increased awareness, which comes with more people having food allergies.
Yeah, exactly. You had found out that you had a food allergy later in life. What was that experience like? How did that impact you?
I will say the first reaction I had was very scary, especially because I didn't know what was happening. My mom wanted me to kind of expand my diet a little bit. So she said, try cashew, which I somehow had never had. And I ate like 3 of them, and instantly it was a really, really difficult experience, especially being that young. I was struggling to breathe. I of course had no idea what was happening. I wanted my mom to call because I thought I was having a heart attack. I just felt itchy from the inside out. And to be completely honest, it's not as bad as an allergic reaction can get. What I later learned was I was on the lucky side. For a lot of people, that experience would have been a lot more pronounced and a lot more scary. So I've been very, very fortunate on that end. And I do apologize. I actually forgot the original question you gave me. Could you repeat it? Because I think I went off track, unless that was it.
No, that was it. You did great. I was just asking you about the first time you experienced a reaction,
Right.
what that was like.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. You
Yeah.
got it.
So yeah, but
That is,
I will add, when I was first diagnosed officially, I didn't understand the implications and what would come with that diagnosis. And so I was like, okay, I didn't like cashews in the first place. This isn't such a big deal. I didn't want to eat them anyway. And then I slowly, what having a food allergy actually entails, that you can't just not eat cashews. You have to avoid things that are made near tree nuts, made on the same equipment. And so it's a much bigger deal than it maybe sounds on the surface.
exactly. And especially for young children, when they develop some sort of nut allergy, even if it's specific, right, a cashew or a pistachio, at a young age, it's very hard for children to really differentiate between different nuts. So it's complete avoidance often for those families completely. Um,
Absolutely.
Last night, with with everyone being in quarantine, we've been trying to make dinner time and meal time a special place where the kids want to sit and talk and enjoy. And so we started playing this game that my husband introduced. Would you rather? And would you rather go skydiving or would you rather snorkel? And I was shocked. Last night, coincidentally, out of nowhere, one of my boys asked the other, would you rather go to Disneyland for 2 weeks with your friends, or would you rather get rid of your nut allergy? And instantly it was like a no-brainer, right?
Right.
No-brainer. I'd rather get rid of my nut allergy. They both were like, what kind of question? And I don't know, as a mother, my heart just kind of just sunk into my stomach. Like, that's how they feel. And they have to live with this day in and day out, that fear, that worry. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Well, that anecdote speaks volumes, and I think any kid that deals with food allergies can relate to that feeling. Just the idea of overcoming it completely, it's like this magical burden that would be lifted. And I think one of the most underrated factors, as like you said, the fear aspect of what you can't eat, and more the fear that anything you can eat could potentially become something dangerous. It's something that's a little bit difficult to understand if you don't have an allergy, just because you're not thinking about eating in that way. But when you do have a food allergy, like just going out to eat at a restaurant, you don't know what could possibly be contaminated. And so, as someone who struggles, if you can think about with the coronavirus, there are a lot of people who might be experiencing a symptom that's completely unrelated to the virus, and you might start scared. Do I have the coronavirus? What's going on? That's kind of like what eating is like for someone with a food allergy. You eat anything and you could feel a little tingle and suddenly think, am I having an allergic reaction? So that constant fear is certainly a burden. And a big part of this documentary was educating, restaurant workers specifically, just because if you're a waiter and you actually pay attention to the request of someone with a food allergy, it makes us feel a lot safer eating at that restaurant, knowing that people are actually paying attention to what's touching what. And it definitely helps to reduce that fear.
Yeah. So, how did you learn to manage your allergies and educate yourself?
Yeah, my parents were a big part of that process, especially my dad. He's a doctor, so he already knew a lot more in this department than I did as a fifth grader. We were fortunate to have some family friends who had food allergies, and they kind of, gave us the rundown on what I was going to deal with. So that was a big part of the education process. Um, but again, it is for a lot of families, you get diagnosed with a food allergy and it's kind of new territory and you don't totally know how this thing works. So we were fortunate in that regard. And we kind of designed the documentary in some ways to hopefully educate families that were new to this so they could kind of get a feel for what that lifestyle is like.
Yeah. I remember when my kids, they were very young when they found out, around 4 years old. And I remember in the beginning trying to educate themselves, they would ask, they'd sit at school and they'd be like, does this pickle have nuts in it? Like every little thing they wanted to learn and understand. A friend of mine, actually, Lori Margolis, recently wrote a book called, oh, you can't see it against this background, but it's called Mighty Jacks and the Cookie Surprise. And it's about this child who has an experience, and it's really meant to educate and empower children with food allergies to be more independent, to recognize, ask questions, recognize signs of anaphylaxis and all of that. And it comes with a stuffed animal that has like a stuffed doll that has an EpiPen. How would that have been helpful to you, having some materials like that as a young child?
Absolutely. Yeah, anything like that, it really does go a long way. And especially with younger children, it's such a difficult concept for them to wrap their heads around. And so the education piece is very important because parents can't be around all the time. Children have to learn how to take care of this and be vigilant independently of their parents. And so that's, I mean, a very, very important piece of this whole mission is educating younger kids on how to take care of this problem.
Absolutely. In your documentary, you talked a lot about holidays, celebrations being challenging as a child, going to parties with Halloween and everything. And how has that changed for you, or has it at all, as you've gotten older?
I have found as I've gotten older, it is much easier for me to decline things that are potentially risky than when I was a younger kid. I think for, kids between 7 and 12, 13, in that age range, it's kind of difficult to turn down a piece of cake off the very, very small chance that it could be contaminated with nuts. And that was an important piece that too, for parents to understand that risk calculation and help the kid make the decision for them, not leaving it up to the kid, because we can't really depend on younger children to always make the smart decision. I think now it's still something I'm always aware of when I go out or to any sort of party. What am I eating, and is there a risk here? But I think now as an older guy, I'm much more careful. I think I've made some very poor decisions in the past that I luckily got away with, but I don't endorse that behavior at all. I think I just being older and understanding the risk, it's just not a risk that's ever worth taking.
Right. No, I agree. Um, so who were your biggest supporters and helpers in making this movie?
Number one was definitely my dad. He was kind of like the figure who, I won't say that I didn't make the movie, but he certainly, of all the people, helped the most, specifically with coordination and just really pushing me along to get this thing done. Um, there were a lot of times where I stalled heavily and didn't want to work on editing or didn't want to schedule this interview. And he was kind of the engine that powered the whole thing. Like, let's do this, helping with ideas and encouragement. Both my parents were very big in that regard. And then also Food Allergy Research and Education Fair. They were very helpful and kind of like a guiding hand as well, and helped us secure our premiere screening that helped get the film a lot of exposure, and they helped promote the film as well. So those were big ones there, but really anyone that was willing to participate and do the interviews, I just have a great amount of respect for, because, seventh grade documentary maker sounds very flimsy, not professional. I'm just fortunate that all these people were willing to help me work on this project, and it was very collaborative in that way.
Do you plan to make any follow-up movies?
So I follow-up documentaries, probably not. I did at a certain time, there was the company that makes EpiPen kind of inflating the prices quite a bit. For anyone that suffers from food allergies knows that EpiPens are outrageously expensive and pretty inaccessible to people who don't have lots of excess funds, which is horrible just because this is a life-saving medication, and that's not an exaggeration. This is a life-saving medication. So that was something I was very passionate in the past, that fortunately major news outlets took over. That was a big story a long time ago. And as far as I know, the prices have been lowered. It's still an issue. I still think they're outrageously expensive. So that was kind of my idea for a follow-up documentary. But as far as other films, as I've said, I've always wanted to be a filmmaker. And so I continue to make fictional short films and plan to make more films in the future. But as far as this topic is concerned, I think I'm done making movies on it, but
But we'll
still
continue
a
to
very
do
important issue.
interviews, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
is there advice that you would give parents about helping their children navigate this food allergy process?
Yeah. I the biggest thing is just understanding that fear aspect. There were a lot of times where I thought I was having allergic reactions and I wasn't. Um, just and not to accuse any parents of not being understanding. I think most parents are, but just really understanding that there's a lot of these totally benign situations that can be very scary. And I think it can never hurt to be supportive of your kids in those situations, try to feel comfortable and safe. Um, and then on the other side, as a kid who was definitely too reckless sometimes, I never had an anaphylactic reaction and my allergies are pretty limited. And so in some situations when, I remember being in Italy actually, and gelato, something everyone wants to have in Italy, but almost every gelateria has pistachio gelato, and that's something I'm allergic to. And I could not really trust these people to give me any gelato without it being contaminated by the pistachio.
Right.
It was very difficult for me to have the willpower to say no. I think parents, big advice is to kind of really hammer that home to kids and just explain, or maybe even provide some sort of backup treat. Because as a young kid, yeah, it's superficial and it's not really important to have ice cream at every event. It sounds like a very spoiled need, but it's a natural impulse that young kids are going to have in those situations. And so being able to help accommodate your kid for that and keep them out of dangerous situations or situations where they have to calculate,
Yeah.
should I take a risk or should I not, is always very important.
Yeah. One thing I'm working on even with my own children is, the risk of sharing a drink with somebody, right? A lot of
Yeah.
kids will share a soda, or if they're, Gatorade at the ballpark or whatever. And all of a sudden, if somebody ate a peanut right before, and then you take a sip and you're allergic to peanuts, there's a lot of scary things that can happen. So even thinking
Yeah.
about that, and being aware. Is there something that you wish that your parents would have done differently?
Thinking back on it, it was a long time ago. I do remember the first time I had an allergic reaction, my parents were skeptical. Now, to be fair, I do have a history of thinking that there are things wrong when there aren't. And that actually made me think, yes, I have a food allergy. I proved them wrong. I knew it. Of course, I was wrong in that regard. I think my parents were very good at handling the situation, and they definitely did the best they could. But just going back to that fear part, if your kid is, you know, experiencing symptoms they think might be an allergic reaction, not denying those symptoms. Comfort is always better, in my opinion, than saying there's nothing, don't worry about it, because that kind of, at least in my experience, makes the problems worse.
Absolutely. That validation and emotional support is critical in those moments. I've been
Yeah.
there firsthand. Um, we got asked a question. What advice do you have for my daughter who is sitting here with me as she enters junior high next year? What is different in junior high versus elementary school? Are there different things she should be thinking about?
Yeah, I guess one thing I'll say is there are some kids who don't understand the severity of food allergies. And if they know you have an allergy, they can almost, without intending to be mean, kind of like, and I have no idea what you're allergic to. I know in my experience, there was once a kid who was like, oh, look, I have all these nuts you're allergic to. And this was not like a food allergy bullying situation, but someone who just really did not understand what was going on and kind of put them in my face. I think just to be careful of situations where other kids are being reckless. And if you're ever in one of those situations, don't let anyone frame you as being oversensitive for being afraid of being even in proximity of something you're allergic to. You have every right to feel uncomfortable in a situation like that. If you're able to just kind of explain, uh, you know, the root of that fear, what's really going on with food allergies, in my experience, other kids will understand. And so never be afraid to explain that fear aspect, because the fear associated with food allergies is absolutely justified and you should never feel any shame for it.
Yeah. How do you anticipate that this will impact your university experience? Just thinking about big college dorms and food cafeterias and all of that.
Yeah. I think I've gotten a lot of good practice being in my last 2 years of high school and eating out at restaurants without parents, just having to make it on my own. Um, it's something I've been living with for a while and I've adjusted to decision making. But one big thing that I have definitely forgotten in the past is just keeping epinephrine on me all the time. That's a mistake I can't really afford to make in the future. That's something that, my parents are like, "Do you have an EpiPen on you?" And anytime I don't, I get yelled at or just made fun of in the car. And so that's something will be around to do for me. So in college, I'm going to have to hold myself accountable.
Absolutely. Where do you carry it now? Where do you make sure, like in your backpack or?
Yeah, so there are a few, there's been people who've said never leave it in your car because certain time in the heat can expire. So I've not ever left an EpiPen in my car. I do leave one in my backpack just to always have on me, on my bed rest. Something easy whenever I pick something up to leave the house, I'll take it. I did used to have this blue bag with epinephrine and Benadryl. One piece of advice I'll give to anyone here with food allergies, this does not apply across the board. A lot of people will just instantly have anaphylaxis. In my personal experience, I have to be aware that I can always have an anaphylactic reaction. I've not dealt with that. When I talk about those experiences where I thought I was having an allergic reaction and I ended up not, my solution was to take a Benadryl. This can temper a lot of the symptoms, and it's different. You inject an epinephrine, you have to call an ambulance. So this is not medical advice and I almost kind of regret speaking because EpiPen is the way to go, but I do carry Benadryl just for that reason because of the psychological
Yeah,
fear of having an allergic reaction. Um, so that might have been mixed advice, but I have a blue bag with two EpiPens. You always want to have multiple epinephrine auto injectors because one is not necessarily going to be enough. And if you are, it's not a permanent fix in many cases. Sometimes you will need to go into an ambulance, which is a very scary reality, but something we have to accept. And so having two puts you in a position where you can uh, stay in a safer place longer before you get the actual medical help.
absolutely. And what I've learned from the professionals in my life are that with each exposure, with each subsequent exposure, the reaction can increase and get worse.
Yes.
So, the first time, for example, when this happened to my son, he vomited and we just thought he had an upset stomach. It wasn't until the next time where he vomited and his body broke out in hives. And so, with each reaction, you can see worse and worse symptoms. Um, is that something that you worry about?
Yeah, I mean, my philosophy is just to expect the worst. That's why I'm always prepared with epinephrine, even though at this point in my life I've never had to use it. You don't want to be living in constant fear, but it is important to understand the reality of the situation, which is that there are allergic reactions that like you always want to be as prepared as possible and prepared for the worst, because there have been a lot of situations that have ended badly, and we don't want to end in those situations. We want to be prepared as well as we can. We can't control every little factor, but we can do everything in our control, and that means being vigilant, reading labels, advocating for ourselves, and being prepared with EpiPens in all of those situations. And as long as you do everything on your behalf and you're prepared, you're usually going to be safe.
Yeah, preparedness is really crucial. Hillary, did any other questions come in that maybe I haven't seen yet? I want to make sure we're able to answer everybody's questions.
Yeah, we had a question about the current health crisis and how some of the changes in society might help with food allergy parents, how they think, not eating unknown foods, cleaning airplane seats or trays in movie theaters. What changes, Jack, do you think are going to come out of the COVID experience that may have long-term good effects for people with allergies?
Yeah, I think that is a very interesting perspective, just how we've kind of shifted our view on sanitation and what something being clean is. Again, I've had a very relatively mild experience with food allergies. I've taught people who have never been on a plane just because they don't know what the surfaces of the airplane seat could be contaminated with. There are nuts served on the plane. I would hope that extra cleaning precautions that we're probably going to start taking as a result of this thing, cleaning down seats and surfaces, will make public spaces more safe for food allergy sufferers, even in school. There's a debate on whether there should be nut-free tables or not, but if kids are eating peanuts, trees, and then kind of putting their hands on a surface, that can result in allergic reaction for someone who's allergic. So I guess if that's a silver lining, that we're going to be more clean, then that certainly will only help.
Agreed. Were there any other questions, Hillary?
We had a question, is there a special grocery store that you like to shop at that helps make daily eating easier for you, or can you get what you need in most any other store? I guess your parents are still kind of doing the food shopping, but now or maybe down the line.
I'm very fortunate. I can find safe foods at almost any grocery store. One group I will give a shout out to, though, is Nut Freeze Cupcakes. They're a feature documentary. Not only are their cupcakes completely nut-free, but they're legitimately fantastic. Like, my brother loves them. I'm allergic to anything. They're available at a lot of grocery stores too, so I highly recommend them whether you have allergies or not. They're amazing cupcakes, and they're completely nut-free. There is no worries there. They're a dedicated nut-free facility, dedicated nut-free ingredients, and if you're ever hosting a birthday party and a kid's coming with allergies, I recommend Nut Freeze Cupcakes. You will not see a decline in quality, but everyone will be able to eat them, assuming that the person's allergic to nuts. Obviously, there's a lot more food allergy.
Right. Yeah. So if there's one thing, Jack, that you want people to take away from our conversation today, what do you want them to walk away with?
For people that don't personally suffer with food allergies, I think the biggest takeaway that I intended from the documentary is we can all do very small things to help make people's lives easier. The world can't necessarily make dramatic changes to accommodate people with food allergies. That's an unrealistic goal. But I think a realistic goal is, the changes that I started to see in my life after this documentary came out. Just my great aunt, instead of buying desserts from this place with all the nuts on the platter, she would buy dedicated nut-free desserts. Or if you work at a restaurant, to understand that this person is not making a frivolous request to avoid contamination with allergens, and that this is something you should write down and take seriously. Or if you're a kid and you have friends with food allergies, to wash your hands if you just ate something they're allergic to. It's all the little things we can do that don't take much effort. And then that empathy part too. I think it's underappreciated how scary this can be, especially for kids who have had truly life-threatening reaction. I personally have, as I said, have not had a reaction where I thought I was going to die. That's not true for every kid that suffers with food allergies. And I think that's something that it's horrible that happens. And I just want to increase empathy on their behalf, because this is a very scary issue and something we should all take seriously.
I agree. I know that my children have experienced that fear. They've experienced that same almost like psychosomatic reaction to if they think maybe they might have eaten something. And so the fear is very, very real. I just want to see last call for questions.
We did have one more question. What is it like when you go to a restaurant? What kinds of questions do you ask? Can you eat anywhere? Do you not go to certain places because you don't think they'll be safe?
There are definitely some places I'll avoid, especially if their menu is just overwhelmingly filled with things I'm allergic to, because at a certain point you can only trust the kitchen so much. The first thing I always say to a waiter is, can you write down that I have an allergy to tree nuts? And I always try to gauge, how far are they willing to go? There's a lot of people that will offer up, yeah, I will immediately tell the chef and we'll make special precautions. There's sometimes you can tell that the waiter is not necessarily taking you seriously, and that's where you have to be a little more pushy to make sure they really understand what's going on. I also always scan the menu. I'm specifically allergic to cashews and pistachios. So if I see any of those sticking out on the menu, I'll take extra note. But yeah, the avoidance part goes beyond what's in my actual meal. It extends to how it's being prepared, and is it being prepared in a safe way? And so I always have to advocate for myself in that department.
Yeah. Were you always comfortable doing that, or did it take time for you to get more comfortable?
No, definitely not. It feels, you never want to be the nag ordering food. You always kind of feel like a nuisance. That's something that, another thing along with that, the fear part, don't be ashamed to be afraid of your food allergy, and do not be ashamed to advocate for yourself, because that's very important. You know, who cares if the waiter is a little frustrated with your demands? Guess what? It's your life, and it's far more important than how fast they can get to the next table. So yeah, it's awkward, but it's something you just have to get over and understand that you need to advocate for yourself before you worry about how other people are viewing you.
Yeah. Thank you. I can't say thank you enough. I can't wait even for after this recording for my own children to watch this. And I know that a lot of children and families will really benefit from this. So I am so grateful, and you are so wonderful and so articulate. So thank you very, very much for your time. Thank you to the audience for joining us. And please check out JCC Chicago's website and Channel J for upcoming programming. Stay well, be healthy, take care of yourselves, and best of luck to you, Jack, at the
Thank you very
University
much.
of Southern California. We wish you all the best, and good luck on finals and AP exams next week.
Thank you. I'll need it.
Okay. Take care.